Hey guys, tonight we drift back in time, not to the usual grandeur of kings or gleaming armor, but to something quieter, heavier. You're standing in the middle of a dusty, sun-bleached town square in the crown of Aragon. The year is 1329. The bells of a nearby church toll the hour, but no one really notices. What grabs your attention is the silence of the market stalls. Baskets that should brim with plump figs and crusty loaves lie hollow. Fishmongers argue over finger-length anchovies like they're silver bars. A baker shakes his head as you hold out a coin. No bread today, not even stale. There's a smell in the air, not the sweet ferment of fresh dough or the tang of ripening fruit, but something faintly sour. Hunger isn't a shout yet. It's a whisper in the alleys, a tension in the shoulders of every passerby. And you, my friend, are about to experience what happens when a prosperous medieval kingdom begins to starve from the inside out. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start walking toward the city walls of Zaragoza. Horses clop past, pulling carts covered in tarps, their contents closely guarded. Underneath, grain, wheat if you're lucky, barley more likely, maybe even acorns and ground beans, which will have to do if there's no real flour. You hear whispers that in some towns the price of grain has tripled. One woman swears she sold her necklace for a sack of oats. Another traded her winter boots for a bag of moldy rye. The crown of Aragon isn't poor exactly. In fact, it's one of the more sophisticated realms in 14th century Europe, stretching from the Pyrenees to the Mediterranean, including Catalonia, Valencia, Aragon proper, and a handful of islands. But complexity doesn't always help when harvests fail and distribution falters. There are ports bustling with merchants and inland hamlets with fields as dry as parchment. What good is a ship full of Sicilian wheat when the nearest mule is starving? You pass a group of children chasing each other with sticks. At least they're trying to chase. Too thin, too slow. They giggle, but it's a tired kind of laugh. You feel it in your chest, that strange cocktail of dread and denial. Everyone knows something's wrong, but no one wants to be the first to say, famine. Historians still argue whether this hunger was truly inevitable, or whether better infrastructure and royal policy might have softened the blow. Sure, the rains had been weird, a couple of off seasons, but nothing apocalyptic yet. The thing about famine is that it rarely announces itself with trumpets. It just shows up, quietly. One failed crop, then two, then three. In the corners of taverns you hear people murmuring about the rich buying up the grain before it hits the market. Speculators, they say. Merchants turning a bad season into profit by hoarding, selling only when the prices soar. One barkeep swears he saw a priest buying grain in bulk with coin from church alms, only to resell it by the ounce. Now, you may be wondering, weren't medieval people used to food shortages? Didn't they always live on the edge? Well, yes and no. Cyclical hunger was a fact of life, but there's a difference between lean months and true famine. In normal years, a village might stretch their stores till spring. Maybe they'd eat more beans and less meat. But when the shortages hit across regions, when the grain doesn't just get expensive but simply vanishes, that's when things break. And let's not forget the weird stuff. One traveler in a border village claims his local priest blamed the hunger on invisible demons that dried out the fields. Another swears the sheep were cursed, a folk remedy circulating in some towns. Hang garlic over your doorway, tie a dead crow to your barn door, and for the love of St. Anthony, don't eat mushrooms that glow. You stop at a wayside chapel. Inside, a skinny monk lights a candle. He prays not for a good harvest, but for forgiveness. You listen closely. He's asking God to pardon the sins that brought this blight upon us. A young girl kneels nearby, clasping her hands so tightly her knuckles pale. She's not thinking about theology. She's thinking about dinner. The mood throughout the land is shifting, like a breeze that starts cool and becomes a storm. You can feel it. Taverns less rowdy, markets eerily quiet, granaries watched like dragon hordes, and all the while that whisper grows louder. There is no food. You look up at the sky, not a cloud, just a wide, bright blue. Beautiful, really. But there's a difference between a sunny day and a month of sun that bakes your crops to dust. The birds circle slower. The earth cracks beneath your feet. And maybe the cruelest part? The denial. The nobles and merchants still host banquets. Boar on silver platters, spiced wine, grapes imported from who knows where. You catch a glimpse through a palace window one evening. Dancers twirling, plates piled high. The city might be starving, but the illusion of plenty clings to the upper crust like perfume. Still, you know what's coming. The signs are all here. Hunger is no longer a rumor. It's becoming a rhythm. You pass a family outside the walls, huddled around a pot over a fire. The smell is strange, sour, a little burnt. They don't look up. They just stir. You don't ask what's in the pot. The whisper of famine becomes a breath. Soon it will howl. You leave Zaragoza behind, stepping onto the winding roads that pull you deeper into the crown of Aragon. A kingdom not so much unified as duct-taped, together with feudal obligations and regional pride. The sun is unrelenting. You shield your eyes, but there's no escape from its judgmental glare. To your left, fields meant for barley and wheat sprawl in long brown furrows. Not golden, not green, just the color of fatigue. Soil that once fed hundreds now gives you nothing but dust between your toes. This is a land of contradictions. The crown of Aragon is vast, with jagged peaks in the north, glittering coastlines in the east, and dry, almost lunar valleys inland. You pass through Catalonia, where bustling port cities like Barcelona still pulse with trade. Merchants unload ships bearing salted fish, dyed silks, and jars of olive oil. The market near the dock smells of brine, sweat, and faintly rancid goat cheese. It's alive, loud, colorful, even a little annoying. But just a few days inland, silence. You pass a shepherd and his emaciated flock just outside a crumbling village near Lydda. The man nods to you, offering a dry chuckle. "The sheep eat better than we do," he says, pointing to a patch of thistle. You're not sure if he's joking. You're not sure if he knows if he's joking. Here's the paradox of the crown of Aragon during famine years. The kingdom has food. It's just in the wrong places. Valencia's orange groves still bear fruit. Mallorca's granaries are guarded like fortresses. But up in the hills, in remote places like Teruel or Huesca, bread has become legend. Transportation is patchy at best. You follow a mule cart for a while, bouncing over cobblestones. The driver tells you the worst part isn't the lack of grain, it's the tolls. Every town, every lord, every bishop takes a little off the top. It's not famine, he grumbles. It's taxes with a knife. You nod, pretending you're just another peasant traveler, and for now, you are. Historians still debate whether it was simple geography or deliberate hoarding that deepened the divide. Some argue the crown's trade networks were flexible enough to shift food around. Others say the nobility made sure only their vaults stayed full. Either way, it becomes very clear very quickly. Geography is destiny. If you're born near the coast, hunger is a rumor. If you're born in the interior, it's a childhood companion. In the city of Tortosa, you attend a grain auction. It's frantic. Voices rise, hands wave, bags of millet change hands like sacred relics. One bag goes for the cost of a decent horse. Another, with weevils crawling inside, still gets bid up by 3 desperate women. You notice one bidder is a friar in plain robes. You look closer. Under his robes, a velvet hem. The church has its ways. Later that night, you rest in a stable behind a baker's shop. The baker doesn't have bread anymore, just stale crumbs and stories. He tells you about the last good year, 1326. We had wine for the wedding season, fig cakes at the solstice, he says, eyes glossy. The priests got drunk and sang the wrong hymns. He laughs softly. Now I'd trade my best rolling pin for a crust of black bread. In every town, you see the same pattern. Those near the sea manage to scrape by. They've got access to trade routes, Sicilian grain, sardines from Marseille, chickpeas from who knows where. The markets feel strained, not empty. You even spot the occasional sweet, honeyed almonds wrapped in thin parchment. But inland, it's all substitute food, barley husks, roasted acorns, flour made from mashed chestnuts, and hope. And let's not forget the creative culinary solutions. In one village, they're baking loaves from ground olive pits. In another, it's boiled cabbage water served in mugs for a copper coin. You sip one. It tastes like sadness and possibly the bottom of someone's boot. You pass through a monastery in the mountains of Ribagorza. The monks are still chanting, still writing manuscripts, still praying 7 times a day. But there's a grim undertone to their rhythm. In the kitchen, you find only turnips and dried beans. One monk confides that 3 brothers have left, not for pilgrimage, but to find food. Whether they'll return, no one knows. You notice something else too: migration. People are on the move, whole families pushing carts, holding babies, walking with no destination but not here. You meet a woman and her 2 sons who left the plains near Zaragoza last spring. "We heard there was food in Tarragona," she says. They found nothing. She looks at her sons like she's afraid they'll evaporate. You don't ask what she fed them yesterday. At night, you camp near a dry creek bed. Insects buzz. The stars don't seem to care about the human misery below them. You think back to the port city from earlier, Barcelona, alive and noisy. It feels like another planet. Maybe that's the cruelest thing, the unevenness. Famine doesn't strike everyone equally. It picks and chooses like a lazy god. And yet, even here, in this cracked, dry landscape, people hope. They plant anyway. They whisper about rain. They sing songs that haven't changed in centuries. Some are lullabies. Some are prayers. Some blur the line between the two. A child near your fire hums one of those songs. You don't know the words, but you understand the tune. It's not about food, not really. It's about waiting, hoping, surviving, even if only until tomorrow. You wake to the clatter of hooves and the faint smell of roasted something. You hope it's meat. It's not. A nearby traveler is boiling bark shavings in a pot. For flavor, he tells you, though you suspect it's more for ritual than taste. You nod and move on, following a thin road east toward a town where the bells never stop ringing. At least, that's what the last village whispered. As you draw closer, the scent of rosemary and smoke wafts in, but so does another smell, one you've come to know too well on this journey. Hunger has a scent. It's faintly acidic, like wet wool left in the sun. You pass homes where windows are shuttered, not for modesty, but for shame. You're approaching a place where the gap between the rich and the poor is wide enough to lose a soul in. Noble estates crown the hilltops. You watch as a lord's procession glides by, banners flapping in the wind, cloaks embroidered with tiny lions and hunting dogs. Their horses are sleek, groomed daily. Their faces are rosy, not from health, but from wine and confidence. They laugh, loud and clear. Behind them, 10 servants push a cart heavy with roasted fowl, sweet cakes, and spiced almond wine. You try not to look hungry. You fail. Down below, in the valley, you enter the peasant quarter. The contrast punches you. Children dig in the dirt for beetles. A woman sells broth made from onion skins and mystery bones. You sit beside her and sip. It tastes like memories and disappointment. "The Count up there," she says, gesturing to the manor on the hill, "had a feast last week. 8 courses. They threw out a whole goose. I watched dogs drag it to the river. And there it is, the obscene truth of medieval famine. The nobles don't starve. They never do. You visit one manor on the pretense of delivering a message. Inside, the dining hall is lavish, with walls painted in lapis blue and gold leaf. You're offered a fig, just one, and you eat it in 3 reverent bites. Behind the main hall, a servant explains the secret. Our food comes from the coast. Special shipments. The Baron keeps a warehouse just for imported goods. Historians still argue whether the crown of Aragon's ruling class truly understood the scale of the famine, or whether they simply chose not to see it. Some documents suggest court officials discussed grain shortages in their letters, but always in the abstract. It's one thing to say, "The people suffer." It's another to visit a village where mothers are feeding their children boiled shoe leather. In the town of Igualada, you pass a market where food is technically available, but the prices are absurd. 1 egg for a half-day's wage, a hunk of cheese for the cost of a mule. You spot a man holding out a silver coin only to be laughed at. "Come back when you have something real," the vendor says. You don't ask what counts as real. Desperation breeds innovation, and not in a good way. You hear rumors of fraudulent bread, loaves filled with powdered limestone or mashed leaves. They look normal until someone chews them. One elderly woman holds up a biscuit and knocks it against a wooden post. "Listen," she says, "that's not bread, that's a trick." In another part of town, a beggar performs songs in exchange for scraps. His lyrics are sharp, mocking the bishop's feast, the mayor's smugness, the way the town walls keep people out, not in. A few coins land in his cap. A few more are dropped by listeners who aren't sure whether to laugh or cry. And then, the banquet. You somehow land an invite to a nobleman's evening feast, thanks to a forged letter and a borrowed tunic. The hall is warm. Candles flicker. Silverware gleams. You're seated near the back, but even here the courses flow like a dream. Pigeon pie, marzipan shaped like doves, jellied eels on porcelain plates. You stare at your napkin for a moment, wondering how many calories it might have if soaked in broth. You try to enjoy it. You do. But every bite sticks in your throat. The music plays. Nobles flirt and gossip. A jester does a handstand while balancing a cup of wine on his foot. And then someone makes a toast. To abundance. Glasses clink. You excuse yourself and walk outside into the night, where a thin girl stands by the servant's gate, watching the windows with hollow eyes. You hand her a sweet from your sleeve. She doesn't say thank you. She just eats. There's a fringe account, a poem really, written by a nun during this time. It describes a man who steals into noble kitchens at night and leaves coins in the pantry, hoping they'll be used to buy food for the poor. Historians debate whether he was real or just a fable told by those who needed to believe someone still cared. You sleep that night on the floor of a barn, full and cold at the same time. Your stomach turns, not from bad food, but from the injustice of it. Hunger isn't just physical, it's political, it's engineered. The next morning, you pass through a village that once held a harvest festival with jugglers, musicians, even fire breathers. Now the stage is empty, the tavern is locked, the festival banner still hangs across the square, flapping in the wind, faded, frayed, and ignored. You wonder how long people will keep pretending things are normal. The nobles eat, the poor scavenge, and somewhere between them you walk, tasting the bitterness of both worlds. Your feet ache from walking. The road's been hard today. Stone, gravel, even a stretch where cart ruts turned into small canyons. Still, you keep going, drawn by the whisper of something different ahead. A monastery built halfway into a cliff, overlooking a ravine where wind sings like monks in a minor key. When you arrive, it's near sunset. The stones are warm to the touch, the air cool with a hint of incense. A brother greets you, not warmly, but not unkindly either, and offers a basin of water. You wash, and in the stillness you notice something. These monks aren't starving. Not really. They're lean, yes, but not hollowed. There's cabbage in the garden, beans drying on racks, and bees buzzing lazily near hives tucked between two fig trees. The abbey's library is cool and dusty, a quiet refuge from the sharp edges of famine. You sit, listening as one of the scribes mutters his Latin, his quill dancing across parchment. He's copying a text on herbal remedies, oak bark for fever, lavender for insomnia, thistle root for digestion. We use what we have, he says, offering a tired smile, and what God allows. This place, like many rural religious houses in the crown of Aragon, has become something rare, a semi-stable sanctuary. It's not wealth that keeps them afloat, but planning, centuries of stored knowledge, crop rotation, and yes, a little prayer. You help carry buckets from the well and are rewarded with a simple meal. Bread that's actual bread, boiled lentils, and a single fig. You nearly cry. Still, even here, the famine reaches its long, bony fingers. Supplies are thinning. Requests for aid arrive weekly, often in the form of desperate families who pretend to be pilgrims just for a bowl of stew. We take in who we can, the abbot tells you over dinner, but we are not a miracle. Historians still argue whether these monastic communities were beacons of relief or fortresses of exclusion. Some records show thousands fed in bad years. Others speak of turned-away crowds and silent cloisters guarded by iron gates. The truth, as usual, is likely somewhere muddy in between. One friar, young, sunburned, a bit too earnest, walks with you through the apothecary. He points to herbs while naming illnesses like they're old friends. This one for hunger bloat, that one for scurvy, that one if your stomach eats itself before you get a second meal. He says it so casually, you laugh. He laughs too. Then you both stop because it isn't funny. That night, you help stir a cauldron in the guest kitchen. The soup is thin, barley, turnip, salt if you're lucky. You carry bowls out to family sitting in the courtyard. One child refuses to eat, staring blankly at her wooden spoon. "She's waiting for her father," the mother whispers. "He left last month for grain, hasn't come back." You stay up late with the night watch, seated under a sky so thick with stars it looks like someone spilled silver dust. The monk beside you shares a story, more legend than fact, of a saint who once turned tree bark into flour during a drought. "I tried it once," he says, shrugging. "Tastes like boiled socks." There's humor here and grim determination. One monk has started painting a mural in the chapel, all warm golds and blues. At the center is Christ breaking bread. At the edges, peasants crowd forward, thin and eager. It's unfinished, half faces, half halos. "Maybe I'll finish it when things get better," the artist says. You don't ask if he really believes that will happen. In the storerooms, you see their last good barrel of olives, a single sack of rice, guarded like treasure, 3 jugs of vinegar wine, bitter but still potent. The abbot shows you their books, meticulous logs of what's come in and gone out. He's worried. "We are not running out," he says, "but we are closer than we like." You ask why they don't appeal to the bishops or the king. He chuckles. "The bishop feasts while we ration. And the king? He governs trade, not hunger." Still, they share. Every day, someone from the abbey carries food into town. Small bundles tied in cloth, passed quietly to widows, orphans, the forgotten. "It's not much," your friar friend says, "but it reminds people they exist." There's a fringed tale among the villagers of a wandering monk who travels barefoot from abbey to abbey, gathering what food he can and leaving it anonymously for hungry townsfolk. It might be myth. It might be that same overeager friar. You promise not to tell. And just when you think this place is immune to the world's chaos, you hear news. The monastery's best beekeeper is dead. Fell ill while on a delivery trip to a nearby hamlet. They bury him with a few prayers and cover the grave in lavender. The air smells sweet, but the sadness lingers. You help clean his old tools, a small wooden hive frame, worn gloves, a bent smoker. "He used to talk to the bees," one monk says, "like they were his children." They're quiet for a moment. Then someone mutters, "They might be the only ones not going hungry." As you leave the abbey, you take one last look back. The monks wave, the fig trees rustle, the wind still sings. But now you hear the note of worry underneath it all. Even sanctuaries are running out of time. The road curls downward into a valley where the rivers should be wide, should be fat with spring melt. But they aren't. You stop at the edge of a dry bed, cracked like old parchment, the stones below scorched under a too familiar sun. Dust lifts in tiny spirals as you walk. A frog skeleton sits in the mud like a warning sign. Nature, it seems, has joined the rebellion. You're not a farmer, but it doesn't take a scholar to know. No water, no wheat, and no wheat means no bread. It's not just human hands making this famine. It's the sky, or the lack of it. This year, the rain never came. Neither did the year before. The locals have names for these moments. L'année de la grande sèche, the year of the great thirst. Not poetic, just true. The crown of Aragon, already battered by poor harvests and rising grain prices, now faces its most implacable enemy, weather that simply won't cooperate. You arrive in a village called Belmont, where every face seems 2 shades too pale and 6 pounds too light. A woman stirs a pot with more stones than vegetables. A boy tries to sell you a catfish he claims to have found. You pretend not to see the thin red thread where he's stitched its mouth shut to look plumper. Belmont's priest preaches that the drought is punishment for sin. God is testing us, he declares. We must return to virtue. He then retreats to the rectory, where you're told he's hoarding dried apricots and barley cakes. You make a note. Virtue and snacks aren't mutually exclusive, apparently. Historians still debate how much of the climate shift during this period qualifies as natural cycle, and how much was aggravated by deforestation, overgrazing, and land mismanagement. You just know it's dry, dangerously dry. The village well is nearly empty. You wait in line behind a mule and 3 barefoot girls. When your turn comes, the bucket drags up sludge. You sip it anyway. Filter with cloth, someone advises, or it'll run right through you. Farmers here have tried everything, planting earlier, digging deeper, even invoking saints known mostly for their talent with rainfall. You pass a crude altar to Saint Medard, decorated with wilted flowers and one brave cucumber. He helped once, an old man tells you, back in 98, or maybe 88. Then come the stories, always whispered, always with a nervous glance. People digging canals at night, stealing water from the bishop's land, rainmakers selling bundles of herbs and chants for silver. One woman tells you about a man who climbed a cliff and tried to bribe the clouds with honey. He fell, she says, but not before the bees stung him blind. Desperate times breed strange behaviors. You see fields plowed but not sown, seeds too precious to waste on empty promises. You see goats chewing on wooden fence posts. You pass a shepherd who's buried 3 of his flock this week. No grass, he says, not even weeds. It's like the earth gave up. A fringe chronicle from a minor noble's diary mentions his attempt to import snow from the Pyrenees. Barrels of it rolled down from the peaks in straw-packed carts to water his vineyards. It melted before it reached the gate. You imagine the look on his steward's face. In a larger town, you visit the granary. It's guarded now, surrounded by a fence and a handful of very tired men with very sharp sticks. Grain is measured by spoonfuls. The miller tells you he's stopped grinding flour because people kept trying to break in at night. I sleep in the attic now, he says, with the dogs. The blacksmith hasn't had coal in a week. He started burning furniture instead. Mostly chairs, he says, as if that makes it better. We sit on stumps now. He shows you a sword half melted from the last fire. Still cuts, sort of. You help a family dig a pit for storing whatever food they can hide. Not from thieves, they say, from taxmen. You blink. They explain. With harvests failing, royal levies haven't stopped. They've just gotten more creative. They tax by mouth now, the mother says. 4 mouths, 4 portions, even if you're just eating nettle stew. That night, thunder grumbles on the horizon. Everyone gathers in the square, heads tilted skyward like sunflowers. A drop hits your lip, then another, then nothing. The storm turns away at the last moment, drifting off like a moody actor who didn't like the script. The crowd doesn't speak. They just shuffle home. You sleep in the loft of an abandoned barn, tucked between a scythe and a pitchfork. The wind sighs through the slats like it's apologizing. In the dark, someone sings a lullaby, too soft to find, too sad to forget. It's about a girl who plants beans in the sky. In the morning, you visit a vineyard. The vines are limp, leaves curled like burned paper. "We'll get 1 barrel," the vintner says, "if we're lucky." His wife laughs. Then we drink it all ourselves. She offers you a fig, cracked and sun-dried, right on the branch. It's chewy, sweet, and tastes faintly of survival. The mayor here has called for a fast. Solidarity, he says. You hear he had roast quail 2 nights ago. There's graffiti on the church wall. Si Deu ne vol pluja, que el rey ens doni pas. If God won't give rain, let the king give bread. It's quickly scrubbed away, but it returns the next morning, bigger. And still, life drags on. You see children racing beetles down a cracked stream bed. You see women baking flatbreads from flour, water, and prayer. You see a man building a rain catcher from old pewter dishes and hopeful geometry. It leaks. He fixes it anyway. In this valley, where rivers used to run and prayers once had weight, people are learning a new kind of faith, not in miracles, not in kings, but in each other. You keep walking, 1 foot after another, under a sun that shows no mercy. You crest a low ridge and see it, sprawled below like a sunburned wound on the earth, a city. Its walls are still standing, but the color's all wrong, too pale, too dusty, too still. You'd expect the noise of carts, bells, 1,000 conversations, but instead it's quiet, not silent, just subdued, like someone turned the volume down on life. This is Lida, once a bustling hub in the crown of Aragon, pulsing with trade, scholars, and the rustle of wheat sacks in every alley. Now you're met by a smell, half smoke, half rot. You step carefully. The streets are clean enough, but only because there's nothing left to spill. No market stalls, no open bread ovens. The bakeries are shuttered. A stray dog sniffs the gutter and moves on. Leda, like many urban centers in the early 14th century, is under siege, not by armies, but by scarcity. And not just of food. Coin, trust, even time seem to be running out. You pass a merchant staring at his empty cart. "I used to sell almonds," he says. Now I sell space. You ask what that means. People pay me to not stand here. Inside the city walls, inequality screams in whispers. A noble carriage rolls by, drawn by a skeletal horse. The driver tips his hat. Inside, a woman nibbles something that looks suspiciously like a peach. Down the same street, a boy digs through dung for beetles. He offers you one. Good protein, he says. You decline. One of the city guards shows you the grain records, meticulously kept and utterly bleak. We've rationed down to half-weight loaves, he says, and they're half sawdust. He lets you try one. You manage 2 chews before deciding hunger might be the better option. Historians still argue whether urban rationing systems like Lida's were equitable or exploitative. Some accounts praise the civic structure, measured distribution, public bakehouses, controlled pricing. Others say the wealthy bribed officials, hoarded flour, and left the rest to chew bark and boiled parchment. Again, the truth is probably both. You chew bark anyway, just to see. It's not great. You find a plaza where someone's put up a famine board, chalked messages in Catalan, desperate offers and trades. Will sow for rice. Dog missing, reward, dried figs. Priest has barley beer, bring firewood. The barter economy is in full bloom. You watch a man swap a silver ring for a small wheel of cheese. Both look like they lost. And in a nearby alley, a fringe rumor finds you. Bread made with bones. You don't ask questions, but you walk a little faster. At night, the city glows faintly with lanterns. You find a hostel, once lively, now home to quiet desperation. Inside, a scholar named Guillem tells you he's writing a treatise on famine psychology. He says hunger changes how people think. When your stomach is full, you believe in tomorrow, he says. When it's empty, you just believe in today's soup. He's right. You share a bowl with him, mostly lentils and bravado. He jokes that Aristotle never tasted famine. You ask what he'll title the treatise. He considers. Maybe on emptiness, or why my quill tastes like turnips. Urban hunger looks different than rural starvation. Here, people walk upright a little longer. They hide the worst of it behind layers of cloth, perfume, and pride. But if you look, really look, you see the signs. Children too quiet, corners that smell wrong, windows nailed shut from the inside. You help at a hospital, one of the charitable ones funded by guilds. Inside, rows of beds. Some patients have fevers. Others have nothing but exhaustion. A girl named Clara shows you how to make broth from onion skins. It's mostly warmth, she says. Flavor is a rumor. A nun tells you they've started praying in shifts. Even God gets tired of repetition. She smiles. You ask if the prayers work. She shrugs. They pass the time, and sometimes that's enough. One strange, brilliant man, call him Ricard, has built what he claims is a hunger clock. It measures the time between food deliveries. Every time someone brings a ration, he marks the wall. 5 days, he says. Next one in 6, probably. You don't have the heart to correct him. One afternoon, you're invited to a gathering. Not a feast, but a sharing circle. Half soup, half story time. People swap memories of better meals. Roasted duck, orange cakes, cheese with honey, and walnuts. Someone cries while describing a cherry. Someone else admits they once ate candle wax. You admit you tried bark. They nod solemnly. You're one of us now. You see a man trying to sell paper prayers, written spells to summon food. Blessed by a friar, he insists. Came from Zaragoza. You buy one out of pity. It reads, O bread, thou holy loaf, appear in haste, or I expire in vain. You stick it in your boot. Doesn't work, but your toes feel holier. In the noble quarter, you peek past iron gates. Gardens still green. Chickens still clucking. You wonder if they even know what the city smells like outside their walls. Maybe they do. Maybe they just stopped caring. You hear a song one night, a lullaby drifting through the alleys, a mother rocking a baby wrapped in scraps. The tune is old, from before all this. She sings it like she believes things will go back to normal. The baby sleeps. You almost do too. And just before you leave, something odd happens. Rain, real rain, not much, but enough to draw people into the streets. They stand still, arms raised, mouths open. A man laughs for the first time in weeks. A woman weeps. You swear you see someone trying to plant something in the cracks between the cobblestones. Hope, perhaps, or onions. You walk out of Leda with wet shoulders and a warm stone in your pocket. You don't remember picking it up, but it's smooth and round, and for the first time in days, you don't feel entirely empty. You're back on the road again, dust in your teeth, sun on your neck, and a strange craving for that onion skin broth. Behind you, Leda sinks into the haze like a fading dream, its rain-washed streets briefly alive again. Ahead lies the rolling countryside of Aragon, where the famine story gets even weirder. This stretch of land was once considered the pantry of the realm. Grains, olives, sheep, the occasional smuggler's route. Now the soil crunches beneath your boots like stale crackers. You pass a family pulling a wooden plow with their own bodies, oxen long since sold or eaten. The father offers a weary smile. We're beasts of burden now, he says, but at least we work together. You nod and help them push the plow a few feet. It squeals like a dying goose. The daughter hands you a carrot the size of your finger. We're saving the big ones for guests, she jokes. You realize she means you. Every village you enter has a system. Some better, some worse. One place uses painted stones to determine daily rations. Another hands out tokens shaped like ears of corn, redeemable for soup if the pot hasn't run dry. In a town called Mequinenza, the mayor holds lotteries. Win and you get butter. Lose and you read poetry to distract others from hunger. You lose. Your performance of Ode to a Lost Turnip receives polite applause. You find a monk walking barefoot down the road. His robe is patched with flour sacks. "Brother Tomas," he says, offering you a dried fig. "We're all pilgrims now." He's headed to Zaragoza, spreading word about a holy spring that supposedly cures hunger. "Miracle water," he whispers, "or just cold. Either way, it's wet." Historians still debate the existence of this spring. Some say it was a marketing ploy by local priests to draw donations. Others claim it was a natural aquifer that dried up just as the pilgrims arrived. You figure even imaginary water can quench hope. Further south, the terrain grows harder. More rock, less soil. You see goats fighting over cactus. A woman in a headscarf sells soup made from boiled grass. "Add vinegar," she advises, "kills the bitterness." You try it. It tastes like regret with a hint of lawn clippings. In one hamlet, people whisper about the secret baker. You follow clues like a medieval detective until you find him, an old man kneading dough in the back of a crumbling chapel. "I use chestnut flour," he says. "Nobody misses the wheat if they never had it." He hands you a bun. It's small, heavy, and delicious in a desperate sort of way. You meet a traveling herbalist named Beatrice. She's fierce, funny, and carries an entire apothecary on her mule. "People can't eat," she says, "but they still get toothaches." She shows you how to brew tea from fennel and moss. Calms the nerves, if not the belly. You ask what the most in-demand cure is. She shrugs. "Sleep. People will pay for a night without dreams of hunger." Beatrice has theories, many of them. "The drought's a punishment," she says, "but not from God, from the earth. We've taken too much. Now it's resting." She's not alone in this thinking. You hear variations everywhere. The land is tired, angry, sick of humans. A few folks claim to have spoken to trees. You don't ask for details. One evening you stumble upon a feast, or what passes for one. A dozen villagers gathered in a barn passing around turnip wine and roasted grasshoppers. Laughter echoes. For a moment you forget the famine. Someone starts a song. A child plays drums on a bucket. You join in, clapping along. When you fall asleep in the hay, it smells faintly of time and joy. In the morning, a boy with bright eyes hands you a drawing, a loaf of bread with wings. "It flies to hungry people," he says, "fast as wind." You tape it inside your satchel. It flutters when you walk. At another village, a strange custom, the hunger bell. Each morning, the bell rings once for every person who went to bed without food. Today, it tolls 12 times. Yesterday, it was 11. People gather to listen in silence. No one speaks until the last note fades. Then, slowly, life resumes. Fringe records mention bell ringers paid in onions, chosen by lottery, and revered almost like monks. Some say the bell's sound changed during the famine, gloomier, deeper, like it mourned with the people. You can't confirm that, but it does seem to echo a little longer than usual. You hear of a village that outlawed crying. "Uses too much water," the mayor explains. Another place taxes shadows. If your body blocks the sun, you owe the king a crumb. That one might be a joke. Might. As you walk, you start keeping a list in your head. 1. Fear. 3 sips of fennel tea. Half a biscuit. A song about onions. 2 silent prayers you didn't mean to say. These things keep you moving. One day, clouds finally gather. Heavy, dark, rumbling. The people around you don't cheer. They wait. They don't trust the sky anymore. When rain finally falls, it's brief but real. The earth drinks. You drink. Even the goats look surprised. That night, you shelter in a shepherd's hut. He gives you broth thick with lentils. First real rain in months, he says. Might be nothing. Might be everything. You fall asleep to the sound of dripping water. It's the most comforting sound you've heard in weeks. And when you dream, it's not of bread or lost cities, but of that boy's flying loaf, soaring through the sky, scattering crumbs over a grateful, tired land. You wake to fog, not the gentle, moody kind, but the thick, clinging sort that tastes like damp wool and old cabbage. The shepherd's hut is quiet. He's gone off with his flock, or maybe just his hope, and you're alone again on the road. Your boots squelch through mud that feels more alive than anything you've eaten recently. Today you head east toward the Pyrenean foothills, where rumor says the famine has created a new kind of lord, not of land, but of hunger. These are the grain barons, landowners, merchants, and opportunists who've turned scarcity into power. One sells barley in spoonfuls, another charges admission to his private well. Water's not free, he says. Not anymore. You stare at him, wondering if he waters his roses with champagne. In the village of Almanar, you meet one of these men, Jaume Descos, part merchant, part messiah. He stands on crates to make speeches, wears a velvet hat, and has a pet goat he claims is prophetic. This goat predicted the rains, he boasts. It twitched its ear. The villagers laugh. Some cheer. Others glare behind his back. His granaries are full. No one knows how. Smart planning, he insists. Nothing illegal. Historians still argue whether Jaume and men like him hoarded grain in good years or merely outsmarted their peers. What's clear is this: when hunger comes, knowledge becomes currency, and secrets are stockpiled like sacks of rye. You watch a crowd gather as Jaume auctions a single loaf of bread. It goes for 2 chickens, a silver brooch, and someone's wool cloak. The winning bidder weeps, not from joy, but from guilt. It's for my mother, she says. She won't eat it. She'll just hold it. You understand. Behind closed doors, there's a shadow market, smugglers in cloaks, merchants whispering in candle-lit cellars. You slip into one such room and hear a woman haggling for saffron, not to eat, but to dye her wedding cloth. We must still marry, she says, even if we marry into hunger. Fringe records tell of grains soaked in wine to disguise mold, of loaves laced with ash to make them heavier. There are rumors of people fermenting acorns, grinding tree bark, boiling leather belts. You visit a tanner who shows you his soup corner, a bubbling pot of hide trimmings. Tastes like the smell of old shoes, he admits. Still better than nothing. Further along, you meet a guild scribe tasked with recording food prices. His ledger is a horror story written in ink. 1 egg, 4 dinars, 1 rabbit, 17, 1 moment of silence, free. He chuckles bitterly. We're documenting madness. You pass through a village where children sell bread-shaped rocks for pretend games. You buy one and slip it into your satchel. It's warm from the sun, surprisingly comforting. In Monzon, a new trick emerges. Ghost crops. Merchants claim shipments are coming. Use that rumor to raise prices, then vanish with the coin. You ask a local man how to tell a ghost crop from a real one. Wait, he says. If it never comes, it was a ghost. Simple logic, terrible economics. A side path takes you to a convent that's become a food sanctuary. The nuns there run what they call the miracle line, a queue that starts at dawn and stretches past the olive trees. They offer bread and broth to all, but only if you bring a story. Every bowl must be earned with memory, says Sister Agnes. You tell them about the bread-shaped rock. She gives you 2 ladles. The lion stories stay with you. A boy who saw a rainbow and prayed for soup. A woman who traded her last earring for salt. An old man who sings to his goat every night to keep it from dying of grief. You wonder if anyone is really starving here, or just starving slightly less loudly. That night, in the convent garden, you hear whispers about a group called Els Fantasmes del Blat, the wheat ghosts. Allegedly, they sneak into hoarders' cellars, steal grain, and redistribute it. You ask if they're real. They're real if you've eaten thanks to them, says one nun, winking. Otherwise, just bedtime stories. Historians still debate whether the wheat ghosts existed or were simply a hopeful myth. Some documents reference mysterious break-ins, empty barns, grain footprints. Others suggest it was local women who, masked by night, fed the hungry while officials looked away. You prefer the version with cloaks and whispered passwords. You meet a farmer who offers this bit of hard-earned wisdom. Hunger makes you remember smells. He walks you through his memory of roasted lamb with rosemary. It lived here, he says, tapping his forehead. Now it lives nowhere. One afternoon you stumble upon a festival. Yes, a festival. It's small, just 3 families, a flute player, and a table with candied almonds, probably fake. They're celebrating St. Afra's Day, patroness of second chances, and sheep. You dance awkwardly. Someone drapes a garland over your neck. For a few minutes, it feels like joy was never rationed. You leave the party with sticky fingers and a tune in your head. The road feels a little less heavy. At the next bend, you spot a lone cypress tree, and tied to it a bundle of grain. A gift, maybe. A warning. A prayer. You don't take it, but you bow your head and keep walking, the sound of the wheat ghosts rustling behind you like wind in dry stalks. By now your feet feel like ancient relics, worn, blistered, half petrified, and your cloak carries the scent of 12 different towns and at least one unlucky goat. Still, you keep moving eastward, following faint rumors of something strange, communal ovens returning to life, not just one or two, but dozens. The fire's back, they say. People are baking again. You arrive in a valley between jagged hills, where the sky always seems a few shades more dramatic. The village of Peralta de la Salle perches along the slope like it's trying not to fall off. There, in a little square, is one of the ovens. It's massive, soot-blackened, older than your grandfather's stories. And it's glowing. The baker's name is Francesc. He's got flour in his eyebrows and the kind of hands that look like they could wrestle an ox and win. "We bake for everyone now," he says, tossing you a lump of something between dough and hope, as long as they bring something to share. People line up, not just with flour or barley, but with stories, songs, onions, even laughter. "One joke is one roll," the baker proclaims. You earn yours with a weak pun about garlic and gallows. Francesc groans, but hands you a roll anyway. Historians still argue whether these communal ovens marked a turning point or just a temporary flicker of solidarity. Some chronicles call it the Flour Pact of 1379. Others claim it happened later or never. But you're here now, and you can smell the yeast rising, see the soot swirling like incense. It's real enough. Inside the oven house, someone plays a hurdy-gurdy. The sound is wonky, magical. You sit on a warm stone bench and watch dough puff into life. There's laughter, burnt fingers, someone crying softly into their apron. It's not much, but it's more than before. Down the valley, other villages imitate this model. In Benabar, they use a shared oven and rotate who gets the golden slot, the coveted evening bake. In Grouse, the baker recites poetry while kneading dough. Flour listens, he claims. If you whisper, the crust comes out soft. You test this by murmuring sweet nothings to your roll. It does seem fluffier. Still, it's not all warm bread and wistful lyrics. You stumble into one town where the communal oven was smashed by a local lord who feared bread communism. He'd rather people starve than stop paying. A mural painted in ash remains on the wall, a loaf with chains around it. You keep walking. At the edge of a pine forest, you meet an old woman named Bernadetta, who bakes over hot stones. Her oven is just a pit with iron sheets, but her bread, flat, smoky, covered in wild rosemary, is unforgettable. "I feed whoever knocks," she says, "but if they're rude, they eat outside. Fair deal." That night you stay in Bernadetta's hut. She tells stories by firelight, of bread riots in Zaragoza, of a boy who tricked a priest into blessing dough, and of the time she baked with ground-up parchment because it looked like flour. She giggles. You try not to think about the taste of legal contracts. She speaks of dreams, too. "I dream of rain falling as grain," she says, "and the dead rising just to bake one more loaf." You ask if she thinks the famine will end. She shrugs. All hunger ends, eventually. You leave her a tiny note. Thank you for feeding the ghosts. She'll understand. Along your way, you pass fields where nothing grows, just scarecrows made from broken tools and sad hats. One has a sign that reads, "The wheat has left, we remain." Another scarecrow holds a spoon. In Barbastro you see a miracle, not water into wine, but barley into beer. A brewer has resumed work, claiming that even despair needs bubbles. You sip a mug of thin, bitter ale. It tastes like survival, slightly fizzy and undeniably odd. There's an impromptu celebration, not a festival, really, just a moment where enough people feel okay enough to smile at the same time. Someone juggles apples, two real, one wooden. Someone else sings a nonsense song in falsetto. A boy hands out dandelions as prizes. "Best fake bread," he announces. You win second place for your rock roll. Someone lights a torch and sticks it into the oven's embers. The flame dances, casting shadows that look suspiciously like dancing loaves. You're tired, but you don't want to miss any of this. Fringe records from the time speak of the bread light, a short period when ovens sparked up across the crown of Aragon, and people dared to believe again. Scholars call it illusory. But then again, most good things start as illusions. The next morning, you find graffiti on a stone wall. We baked, we shared, we remembered what it felt like to be human. You walk a little lighter after that. By midday, you're in a settlement experimenting with a strange ritual, the crumb exchange. Every person who eats must donate a single crumb to a communal jar. Someday, the jar keeper says, we'll have enough to bake a loaf from memory alone. You ask what happens if the jar is stolen. Then we start again, she replies. We always start again. And you wonder, has famine only taken food, or has it taken the fear of starting over? As you leave the village, you glance back and see smoke rising from the oven. You can almost hear the crackle of crusts forming, the laughter of someone whose joke finally landed well enough to earn a slice. And in that warmth, in that absurdity, something inside you begins to lift. You still don't know when the rains will return or if the next field will grow anything but weeds, but you know this: people are baking again, and that somehow feels like the first real victory. By now, the famine is no longer just a whisper in the background. It's the rhythm of the land itself. You can feel it in the way people walk, talk, even breathe, as if everyone's carrying an invisible stone in their stomachs. And yet, oddly, in some corners of the crown of Aragon, a strange kind of order begins to emerge. You arrive in the town of Fraga, where something peculiar is unfolding. It's not a feast or a riot, but a council, a real one, not of nobles or bishops, but of weavers, butchers, shepherds, and widows. They meet in the old grain hall, now repurposed into what they call the Hunger Commons. Here, decisions are made not with swords, but with stories and arguments and far too much hand-waving. "We vote by bread," says a man with a crooked nose. "You place your crumb in the pot of the idea you like most." Simple. And somehow it works. This town has created a ration ledger, equal shares for every household, regardless of wealth. The rich grumble. The poor blink, unsure if it's a trap. But it sticks. Historians still argue whether Fraga was an isolated case or part of a broader grassroots shift toward local democracy. Some believe similar experiments popped up across the crown, little bursts of civic sanity in a chaotic world. Others think Fraga was just weird. You sit in on one of the meetings. The topic, whether cats should be exempt from sharing their caught rats. One boy stands and delivers a passionate defense of feline autonomy. "They earn it," he declares. The room applauds. The cats, presumably, are unaware. The vote ends with a resolution. Cats may keep one rat per week, but the rest goes to the kitchen pot. It's absurd. It's beautiful. Later, you're shown the town's memory wall, a stretch of stone where people etch names, phrases, even jokes. One carving reads, "I once ate a boot." Another, "My brother traded a fish for a hug." The walls rough with history, soft with humanity. And it's not just food they're rationing, it's time, tools, stories, even music. You watch a man check out a violin for the afternoon, literally sign for it like it's a library book. "Only 2 songs," the keeper warns. "We need quiet for the bread to rise." Further east, in a hamlet near Tamarite, you meet a woman named Elisenda, who has become something of a one-woman council. Her title, the Chooser of Fairness. She walks from house to house, listening to disputes, doling out small judgments. You get the cheese rind, he gets the spoon. Next case. Her logic is unorthodox, but trusted. You ask if she trained in law. She laughs until she hiccups. "No, dear, I just never stopped paying attention." Historians mention figures like Elisenda, unofficial judges who rose from necessity. Their records are murky, but their footprints remain in oral tales and a few local ledgers scribbled in charcoal. Back in Fraga, you witness another innovation, the bread bell. It rings at dusk, not for prayer, but for sharing. Anyone with food brings it to the square. No questions asked. You watch a man drop a single turnip into a basket, then stay to hear a blind woman sing about her favorite soup. Not all agree with this newfound order. A traveling noble arrives, scoffing at the crumb voting system. "This is anarchy in peasant clothing," he sneers. Within minutes, he's pelted with stale crusts. Democracy, it seems, has teeth. In a nearby glen, you meet a group who've started growing mushrooms in old barrels. "Fungus is the future," says the leader, whose name might be Geoffrey or possibly just Mushroom Guy. He's convinced the famine is punishment for ignoring the gifts of the damp. You taste a sample. It's chewy, a little like regret, but surprisingly filling. Stranger still, you come across a Roman truth cart. Think of it as a mobile confession booth meets town crier. People step in, shout a grievance, or confession and step out lighter. I stole a pair in 1374, someone bellows. Applause follows. The cart creaks onward. There's something contagious about all this. Not joy exactly, but a kind of resistance to despair. The kind that says, if we must suffer, we'll suffer creatively. You pass a school made of woven sticks, where a teacher draws letters in ash on flat stones. We're training future scribes, she says, even if there's no parchment left. One boy holds up his stone proudly. It reads, bread, you clap. In the village of Altoricon, a group has started painting murals with berry juice and charcoal. Their most famous piece, a giant wheat stalk rising from a skull. Beneath it, we are more than what we've lost. The painter, a girl of perhaps 12, explains, the skull isn't death, it's soil. You nod, pretending not to tear up. She's already moved on to mixing beetroot with lard to get a nicer red. It's not utopia, obviously. There are still days when people faint from hunger, when the stew is just hot water with 2 green things and a wish. But now there's an effort to mitigate the chaos, to bend suffering into something slightly more manageable, even a little meaningful. You spend your last evening in Fraga by the bread bell again. This time, someone's roasting chestnuts. Someone else is juggling root vegetables. A woman plays a flute made from a bird bone. You sit beside a boy who tells you he dreams of being a food poet. What does a food poet write? You ask. He replies solemnly, mostly haikus about soup. Here's one he shares. Broth is not a meal, but it can pretend to be if you close your eyes. You clap again. It's the best thing you've heard in days. That night, as you lay beneath a cracked roof with stars peeking through, you realize something. Order, in times of famine, doesn't come from kings or councils. It bubbles up from the hungry, the stubborn, the strange, from crumb votes and bread bells and murals made of beet juice. And tomorrow, you'll follow the scent of something cooking, real or imagined, just a bit farther east. You leave Fraga before dawn, with one last stolen whiff of roasting chestnuts in your memory. The stars are still out, pale and sleepy as you head deeper into the interior. The path is quieter now, fewer travelers, fewer carts. Either people are settling down or they've stopped moving altogether. Soon you enter flatter, more exposed land, where villages huddle together like secrets afraid of the wind. The famine's touch is harsher here. Even the birds seem to sing more cautiously. But oddly, this is where something unexpected emerges. The return of festivals. Yes, festivals in a famine. You blink the first time you hear the music. Surely it's a hallucination. But no, as you crest a hill, there it is. Colored cloth strung between skeletal trees, a half-deflated pig bladder being kicked around by children, and a very determined man trying to play a dulcimer with only 3 strings. Welcome to the festival of Almost Enough, held in the village of Ontinyena. The name is literal. Nothing is in abundance. The bread is half rye, half mystery flour. The wine is mostly boiled plum juice. The meat? You don't ask. But people are smiling. Sort of. The event opens with the procession of lost recipes. Locals carry scraps of parchment, stained and torn, bearing ancient dishes no one remembers how to make. One woman reads out a recipe for peacock and almond broth, and everyone cheers ironically. You join in. It feels good. Historians still argue whether these famine festivals were coping mechanisms or actual attempts at morale-boosting ritual. Some believe they were deliberately absurdist, a form of protest wrapped in pageantry. Others think they were grassroots religious acts, offerings of joy in the face of divine wrath. What's clear is this: they happened, and they were weird. That night, there's a play, a satirical tragedy called The Turnip King. It's about a monarch who declares turnips to be the solution to all problems. Predictably, it ends with everyone either starving or exploding from turnip overload. The audience howls with laughter. You find yourself next to a man dressed entirely in cabbage leaves. "I'm the spirit of not dying," he tells you. It's a very competitive role. You don't ask questions. You just hand him your last dried fig in tribute. The next day, you move on to Alcolia, where they're hosting Bread Mess, a parody of Christmas held in the middle of spring. There's a tree. It's actually a rake. People hang crusts from it like ornaments. Someone gives you a gift, a single almond carved into a tiny loaf. It's absurd. You love it. In Tamarite, they celebrate Stew Day, where every household contributes one ingredient, edible or not, to a communal pot. The stew tastes like betrayal, but it's hot, and everyone gets a bowl. "The warmth is the point," says an old man who added a rock for spiritual flavor. Not every village joins the trend. In one grim place, you're chased off for humming. "Music attracts curses," they hiss. Fair enough. But in most places, something is catching on. People need something to break the monotony of suffering. Festivals fill that role, even if they're stitched together from scraps and sarcasm. There's even a traveling troupe now, La Compañía de los Gorgojos, the Weevil Company. They perform puppet shows, tell riddles, and reenact famous food riots using marionettes made from broom handles and dried gourds. You watch them stage a mock trial of a loaf of moldy bread. The bread is found guilty of insufficient joy. The sentence, to be eaten anyway. The crowd roars. You ask the leader, a woman named Violante, why they keep going. She shrugs. Because death is boring, and laughter feeds something. Some nobles begin to catch on. A countess in Mequinenza funds a feast of small things. She provides salted radish peels and a single bottle of wine. But more importantly, she lets the peasants gather on her land without fear of being clubbed. That alone feels like a miracle. Meanwhile, the church has mixed feelings. Some priests denounce the festivals as heretical mockery. Others join in. One friar blesses a vat of lentils, then jumps in for comic effect. If God didn't want joy, he wouldn't have invented beans, he proclaims. You nod solemnly. The man makes a point. A fringe chronicle mentions a secret society that supposedly formed around this time, the Guild of Hungry Jesters. No evidence confirms their existence, but their motto, "Laughter before loaves," starts to appear carved into walls, etched into spoons, whispered across fields. You begin to wonder if absurdity is the final desperate tool of survival, that by making fun of hunger, people are reclaiming their dignity, if only for a few hours. One night, in a hayloft under a sheet of thin moonlight, you lie next to strangers and listen to someone softly recite the Ode to Onion Soup. It's not very good, but everyone claps when it ends. And you remember what one child told you earlier. If you pretend to celebrate, sometimes the pretending stops. You wake to the sound of distant drumming, someone using empty grain bins. It's offbeat, clumsy, and oddly joyful. You smile. Before leaving the area, you visit one last festival, the Night of Imaginary Food. People gather around a table and describe the most magnificent meals they wish they could eat. A boy closes his eyes and says, "I taste strawberries, but warm, like sunshine." A girl describes clouds that melt like cheese. You offer a soup made of dreams and garlic. The table erupts. Of course, your stomach still growls. Of course, none of this fills you. But something in you feels fuller anyway. You walk on, humming a tune from the Turnip King, and for once the silence doesn't feel so lonely. You leave behind the festivals, the bread mass trees, the cabbage costumes, absurd joy tucked safely in your pocket, and drift westward toward the mountainous hinterlands. Here the air grows thinner, and so does hope. The famine hits differently in the highlands, less theatrical, more quiet. Villages here don't throw stew parades or puppet shows. They vanish. You arrive at one such place, an unnamed settlement etched into a slope like a forgotten thought. No smoke from chimneys, no barking dogs, no music. You knock on a door. Nothing. Another. Only the echo of your own breath. Finally, an old woman steps into view, wrapped in every scrap of cloth she owns. Her eyes are sharp, her teeth fewer than you'd expect. "You're late," she says, as if she expected you. You sit with her in the remnants of what used to be a communal barn. She pours you pine needle tea and tells you about the stillness. That's what they call it here, not famine, not hunger. The stillness took them, she says, like fog, but slower. She's not poetic, just precise. Around her, you find signs of a vanished population. Boots by empty beds, looms with unfinished cloth, candles burned to nubs. Not a mass grave in sight. No violence, just abandonment. Hunger, it turns out, has an elegant cruelty. She shows you the grain book, a hand-bound ledger where the villagers once recorded every kernel they owned. It reads like a diary of despair. April 6th, 2 sacks lentils. April 10, 1 sack stolen. April 12, migraine returns. Then, blank pages. Historians still argue whether these ghost villages were wiped out by death or dispersion. Did the people die quietly in place, or scatter into the valleys and cities, seeking scraps and cousins with softer beds? Records are sparse, oral memory even sparser. You press on, visiting a cluster of semi-abandoned farms near Boltania. There, a different strategy took root, what you might call intentional retreat. The remaining families huddle into one structure, boarding up the rest. Fewer roofs to patch, fewer fires to light. It's the medieval version of downsizing. In one such building, you find a family of 7 sharing a single room. The mother grinds chestnuts into powder while humming a lullaby that's clearly older than anyone alive. She smiles but doesn't stop working. If you eat slowly, she says, you forget you're hungry. They tell you about the long lunch, a custom born of necessity. Every meal, no matter how small, is drawn out for hours. One bite every 10 minutes. It's a family ritual now. Even the toddler waits his turn. You try it. It's painful, but strangely dignified. That night you join a quiet circle in the barn. No talking, just sitting together, listening to wind pass through cracked shutters. Someone passes around a single apple slice. No one takes more than a nibble. It's not about the food, it's about being seen. You sleep on hay that pokes you awake every 20 minutes. Each time you hear the soft breathing of the others. It comforts you. The next morning, the family sends you off with a luck knot, a piece of twine knotted 7 times, one for each surviving member. You tie it to your belt, where it swings with each step like a heartbeat. Further along the Pyrenees foothills, you encounter the remnants of an attempted food commune. According to an inscription on a wooden post, it was called Casa del Pan para Todos, House of Bread for All. You find the building, half collapsed, soot-stained, and inside a ledger frozen in time. It lists rules. All contributions go into the pot. First served the weak. No fighting during meals. No jokes about soup, ever. Clearly, someone broke that last rule. A side note reads, Tomas laughed at the broth. We all remember. You camp there that night, near what was once a communal stove. Someone has etched into the stone, we weren't saints, just hungry and hopeful. The wind howls through the gaps in the walls, and for the first time in days, you feel the weight of solitude return. The festivals and communal meals feel like another world. But not all hope is lost. In the town of Ainsa, built like a fortress into the cliffs, you find signs of endurance, not celebration, but craftiness. Here, famine has made people cunning. They've built terraced gardens up the cliffside using ash, crushed bone, and composted leather as fertilizer. It smells horrific, but the sprigs of green are real. A boy offers you a sprout. We call it cliff parsley, he says, because it tries not to die. You visit their food vaults, stone-lined caves used to ferment roots and dry herbs. The air is pungent and sharp. You sneeze. The woman leading you laughs. That's how you know it's working. They've even revived ancient foraging techniques. Bark flour, ant eggs, smoked lichen. It's not food, one man shrugs, but it's not food. In Ainsa, Nobody wastes anything. A cracked pot becomes a bird feeder. A broken spoon becomes a flute. A shirt with holes is a napkin, then a bandage, then fire starter. The town runs on a kind of elegant desperation. Historians later dubbed this period the Gray Revival, a time when bleakness bred invention. There are few written records, but in cave walls they find strange diagrams, vertical farms, wind catchers, solar reflectors made of polished tin, centuries ahead of their time, or maybe just folk wisdom dressed in necessity. Before leaving Ainsa, you watch a woman bake something called stone bread, a flat, near inedible disk made of ground grain husks, pine dust, and boiled moss. It tastes like regret and elbow grease, but it lasts forever. This is for my great-grandchildren, she says, wrapping each one in cloth. They may never eat it, but they'll know I tried. You nod. Somehow that matters. As you descend from the highlands, not still swaying on your belt, you realize the mountains didn't sing or dance like the villages below. But they survived, not because of joy, because of discipline, and because someone, somewhere, refused to stop planting seeds. And in a world where even shadows feel famished, maybe that's enough. You descend into the valleys with a mind full of cliff parsley and ghost villages, of silent circles and soup jokes no one dares make. Below, the land flattens again, and with it comes a new smell. Paper, not parchment, paper, documents, ledgers, orders, bureaucracy. Welcome to the famine's least charming chapter, administrative response. In Zaragoza, you find the beating heart of Crown of Aragon officialdom, towers of scrolls and very tired men wearing cloaks they think make them look important. And in their defense, some of them are trying. The problem is that managing a famine by ledger is like trying to douse a wildfire with a ladle. You sneak into a town meeting held in the former granary. The air smells like dust and ink. On the table, a series of proposals written in thick, overwrought Latin. One counselor proposes new price caps on bread. Another demands a ban on exporting food. A third, rather optimistically, suggests encouraging people to eat more slowly. Historians still argue whether the Crown's famine response was sincere or performative. Some see genuine, if feeble, efforts to redistribute food and control hoarding. Others point to the glaring incompetence and endless delays. The most honest take? Both things are true. A clerk lets you peek at the Register of Mercy, a rolling list of who received aid and when. You notice a pattern. The rich get first dibs. One entry reads, "Aid sent, 3 sacks wheat, 1 goat, 5 candied figs." Recipient? Don Bernat, cousin of a cousin of the Archbishop. Meanwhile, a peasant widow below is noted only as given heir. You ask the clerk about it. He shrugs. We give what we can. Then he pauses. But we mostly give to people who can give back. Still, some cities experiment. Barcelona, wealthier than most, establishes granaries called almoin, charitable depots meant to support the most desperate. You visit one on the edge of the city. It's tidy, watched by guards. People queue in silence. Each gets a portion measured precisely. You speak to a young mother clutching a small cloth bundle. "They say I can come once a week," she says, "but my baby eats once a day." Meanwhile, rural bailiffs attempt to enforce anti-hoarding laws with mixed results. In one village, an inspector finds 2 whole pigs hidden in a hollow wall. He demands they be surrendered to the commons. The farmer counters, "These pigs are sacred." The inspector blinks. "To what god?" The farmer grins. "To bacon." Some records show councils requiring bakers to include more sawdust in their bread to stretch supplies. The sawdust is carefully sifted, the decree notes. You try a piece. It tastes like gritty disappointment, but the people are grateful for anything with shape. Ironically, towns that enforce harsh rules sometimes do better, because fear, like salt, preserves. In Huesca, fines for black market trading are posted in public squares. "One loaf hoarded equals 1 finger lost," reads one sign. You notice the local baker wears gloves. You choose not to ask. And yet, there are surprises. In some municipalities, women gain unexpected power during the crisis. With men away or dead, female heads of household begin appearing in market records, trade accounts, and even property leases. The famine opens cracks through which new roles emerge. You meet one such woman, Aldonza, who now runs her late husband's grain brokerage. She's sharp, calculating, and wears a knife on each hip, not for protection, she says, but for slicing truth from excuses. "No one lies to a hungry woman," she tells you, and you believe her. She offers a tour of her ledgers. "Look here," she says, pointing to columns marked real, reported, and imagined. You ask about the last one. "People claim to have things they don't." She shrugs. "Sometimes I sell that too." She tells you the best way to manage a famine isn't to feed people. It's to convince them they might eat tomorrow. That hope, rationed carefully, stretches further than grain. Crown officials experiment with famine tokens, essentially IOUs for future food. They carry royal seals and are traded like currency. You hold one. It's waxy, fragile, and signed by someone you suspect doesn't understand starvation. But merchants accept them, for now. In Tortosa, you stumble on something stranger still. A game, a dice-based game played with ration cards as chips. Whoever wins takes the entire pot of barley cakes. It's dark, cruel even, but it draws a crowd. "It's fairer than the nobles," someone mutters. Meanwhile, in Valencia, rumors swirl of grain convoys being hijacked, not by bandits, but by rival towns. Famine raiding, they call it. You hear whispers of nighttime raids, wagons set on fire, and border guards accepting bribes in walnuts. One man tells you, "We're not starving because of nature. We're starving because of neighbors." Historians often highlight this fragmentation, how famine turned community into competition. The crown of Aragon was never fully unified in practice, and crisis only deepened the fault lines. Regions began stockpiling, hoarding, building walls, literal and social. Your journey confirms it. Everywhere you go, you find new rules, new guards, new suspicions. Even the monasteries start charging for soup. One friar confesses, God forgives hunger, but he doesn't pay taxes. Yet, amid the dysfunction, sparks of innovation remain. One town tests communal food gardens funded by bakers' guilds. Another creates wandering kitchens, traveling soup carts, visiting remote hamlets. You follow one cart for a day. It's run by two nuns and a retired butcher named Pear, who sings lullabies to potatoes. You help serve boiled greens to a group of barefoot children. One girl thanks you by handing you a pebble. It's lucky, she says. You keep it. In the evening, a debate erupts between two councilmen, one who wants stricter grain controls and another who believes in market freedom. They argue until nightfall. In the end, nothing is decided. The famine continues. You leave with a stomach half full and a brain overstuffed. Bureaucracy, you decide, is like boiled cabbage, necessary but better with salt. Or a revolution. You've slogged through ghost villages, chewed moss bread, and tiptoed through bureaucratic rice paper mazes. But now your feet carry you into different terrain, not geographical, but spiritual. Because when bellies empty, souls either collapse or catch fire. You arrive at a small church outside Lida. The bell hasn't rung in weeks. Inside, the priest, gaunt as his sermons, is hunched over a cracked altar, muttering Latin so fast it sounds like wind. When he notices you, he smiles, not from joy, but from a kind of hollow politeness. You hungry for food or meaning? He asks. You pause. Yes. Across the crown of Aragon, as famine digs in, people seek more than bread. They crave understanding, a pattern, a reason, and religion, especially Catholicism in its high medieval drama, offers plenty. This is the age of flagellants, bands of shirtless penitents who march through towns whipping themselves bloody, chanting prayers between every lash. You hear them before you see them, the thunk of whip on flesh, the rhythmic cries of miserere, and the gasps of onlookers clutching children closer. One participant, a boy barely 15, tells you he joined after his mother died. They said God listens louder when you bleed, he explains, his voice barely above a whisper. I think he heard me yesterday. I found half a turnip. You try to hide your reaction, but inside, your heart stumbles. Historians still argue whether these movements helped or harmed society. Some towns embraced them, others banned them outright. Sometimes they sparked spiritual unity, sometimes they caused mass hysteria. In Tortosa, you see a different form of religious reaction. Apocalyptic preachers shouting from carts, painting doom in vivid reds and golds. The end is here, one cries. Buy garlic, save your soul. Oddly specific, but apparently persuasive. The garlic seller next to him does brisk business. And yet, for every prophet screaming into the wind, there are monks and nuns working quietly in soup kitchens, sewing clothes, burying the dead. In a convent near Girona, you find Sister Margarita boiling wild greens. She gives you a bowl and says, God feeds the birds, but he gave us hands. She's not a mystic. She's a logistician. Under her guidance, the convent produces 300 meals a week from roots and foraged herbs. We call it Jesus stew, she winks. It performs miracles, mostly of disappointment. Still, people line up. They laugh, they pray, they survive. You visit a monastery famed for its miracle loaf. The story goes, one monk, Father Bernat, found a bag of barley in the cellar during peak famine. He fed an entire town. The bag never emptied. You examine it. It's just a bag, but its story fed more than mouths. Later that night, a young novice confides in you. The bag did run out, he whispers, but by then everyone was already full of hope, and that is harder to kill. Yet not all spiritual turns are toward kindness. In more desperate corners, fear turns darker. Scapegoating festers like mold in a damp cellar. You hear whispers of foreigners poisoning wells, of Jews hoarding grain, of women flying at night and stealing milk. The old rot of suspicion blooms again. In Barcelona, a crowd gathers outside the Jewish quarter. The tension is brittle. A child is missing. Rumors swirl. Then someone throws a stone. You don't wait to see what follows. You already know. Famine rarely kills clean. It corrodes the mind, then the body. Still, faith takes surprising forms. In a hillside chapel above Mont Blanc, you meet a hermit named Udald, who claims to speak with saints. You expect nonsense, but instead he offers you a game. If you can guess how many peas are in this jar, you eat. You guess wrong. He gives you the peas anyway. Faith, he says, is mostly just showing up. Udald tells you stories of dreams shared by farmers, visions of fields reborn, of bread falling from the sky. Is it prophecy, you ask, or hope? He chuckles. Same thing. He points to the stars, then to a patch of dry soil. Both are hard to read. Both grow food if you're patient. He gives you a coin with a hole through the center. So God can peek through, he says. Spend it when you forget who you are. You keep it. Not all spiritual coping is Christian. Along the Ebro River, you meet families clinging to pre-Christian rituals, burning juniper to ward off famine spirits, burying bread crusts under moonlight. One woman chants over a pot of wild barley. The land listens, she insists. It just doesn't always answer. Historians tend to file this under folk belief, but you sense something more, maybe not fact, but function. These rituals give rhythm, direction, a sense of action when action feels impossible. At one gathering near Alcañiz, a group of women form a prayer circle around a pile of stones. Each stone represents a lost, loved one. They hum not to summon, but to remember. The vibrations feel like breathing. Later, you see a carving above a chapel door. Faith does not fill bowls, but it fills time until bowls return. You smile. That sounds about right. One night, you sit by a fire with a mute shepherd and his dog. He doesn't speak. The dog doesn't bark. Together, they radiate peace. When he finally scribbles something on a slate and shows you, it reads, "God feeds those who feed each other." Simple, tidy, more nourishing than any sermon. As you lie under the stars that night, head resting on a sack of turnip tops, you realize famine isn't just absence, it's presence, of silence, of prayer, of whispered fears and defiant hope. And somehow, even in all this dust and smoke, something sacred flickers. You wake to a sky the color of wet stone, the kind that makes you squint and ask the clouds if they're in a generous mood. They're not. But that's fine. You've seen worse. You've eaten worse. Today, you find yourself among voices again, not preachers or scribes this time, but storytellers, balladeers, and travelers, the wandering memory keepers of the crown of Aragon, because even during famine, stories flow like water where bread cannot. You're in a small square in Teruel, where a wiry man with a battered lute sings a half-song, half-rant about a baker who accidentally feeds an angel and is rewarded with an oven that never goes out. Children giggle. Adults half-smile. No one believes it, but no one cares. Famine may devour grain, but not imagination. In another town, a grandmother tells tales of El Yop de la Femme, the famine wolf. It prowls villages, sniffing out greed and punishing hoarders. How does it punish them, you ask? She grins. It eats their dreams. A child nearby clutches his blanket a little tighter. These stories are more than bedtime distractions. They are blueprints, emotional manuals passed down when logic and law fail. They teach who to blame, who to forgive, and what hope smells like, even if you've never tasted it. One afternoon, in a wind-swept outpost near the Pyrenees, you hear a tale of a woman who gave her last crust of bread to a beggar. In return, she was given a single silver spoon that never rusted, no matter how poor her kitchen. That spoon's still out there, the storyteller whispers. Some say it waits for the next famine. Historians still argue whether these famine myths emerged from collective trauma or earlier traditions reshaped by crisis. Likely both. You decide they're like sourdough starters, fed by grief, shaped by the hands that need them. You join a group of travelers huddled in a barn, swapping stories for dry places to sleep. One man claims he once dined with Queen Violante during the worst of the hunger. She gave me a pear, he says, eyes gleaming, a whole pear. No one believes him, but he tells it well. Someone else hums a tune with lyrics that go, "If grain you lack, then wine you pour, and toast the rats behind your door." You laugh. Everyone laughs. The rats scurry indignantly in the rafters. And laughter. It's a surprise guest in this world of gray skies and grayer soup. You meet a juggler who performs with stones shaped like loaves. "I juggle your hopes," he cries. One child tries to eat a rock. He shrugs. Sometimes it works. In Valencia, a scribe offers you a pamphlet he's written, a fictional diary of a pig surviving the famine by pretending to be a priest. It's bizarre. It's slightly blasphemous. It's brilliant. The pig writes in Latin, by the way. Art blooms strangely in scarcity. With paper scarce, you find drawings etched into walls, caricatures of nobles hoarding grain, angels vomiting coins, and one especially haunting image, Death carrying a basket of wheat, smiling as he walks past starving children. You trace the lines with your fingers. They're rough, angry, real. Then there are the songs, low, melancholic things sung around fires, shared like crusts. In one village, the refrain goes, "Fields are bones, but still we sow, for spring remembers what we know." You hum it all day. In Barcelona, you visit a library of the empty pot. Not a real library, but a secret room beneath a tavern where people carve famine stories into the walls. One message reads, "My son died, but my daughter lived. That is the shape of love now." Another, "We boiled boots, but not hope." Even illiterate peasants leave marks, finger-smudged drawings, symbols, initials beside handprints. You press your hand into one. It fits. Time, it seems, has broad fingers. One night, beside a ruined windmill, you meet an old soldier-turned-minstrel who offers to trade stories. You give him the tale of the famine wolf. He nods solemnly, then says, "I knew her." You blink. "Her?" He grins. "Terrifying snore. Saved my village." Before dawn, he teaches you a lullaby he claims came from Aragonese mercenaries trapped in Sicily during a siege. Bread is a promise, not a fact. But even empty hands can act. You write it on your arm with charcoal so you won't forget. At this point, you begin to see the famine not as a single catastrophe, but as a field scattered with stories, each one a seed, some bitter, some sweet, all planted in memory, and not just among the poor. Noble families commission paintings, tapestries, even stained glass windows to commemorate their generosity during the famine, most of it exaggerated, some of it real. One cathedral window shows a baron hand-feeding a beggar. You later learn the baron fled to Naples during the crisis. But no matter. The story has a life of its own now. You discover old ledgers repurposed as journals with margins full of poetry. Today we traded onions for a lie. It tasted better than the truth. Somewhere in Aragon, stories become survival. They warn, they entertain, they soothe, they persist. And you're now one of them. You've heard the wolf howl, tasted the dust, listened to laughter rise like bread in a hot oven. You've gathered the whispered myths, the sung jokes, the scribbled prayers. You leave behind a stone in one of the story circles. You carve a little symbol into it, a spoon and a flame. Someone will ask what it means, and someone will answer, "You don't mean to return to where you started," but somehow you do. The dirt roads twist like a dream you can't quite wake from, and your steps, worn thin by weeks of stories and silence, pull you back toward the coast, toward the low valleys and scattered markets of what used to be plenty. Only now everything feels thinner, like a sheet of parchment rubbed too many times. You pass through Tarragona, where olive trees still stand, but the fruit has long been picked or rotted. In one field, an old farmer sits under a brittle canopy, counting seeds one by one. They say you need 40 to make hope grow, he says, dropping each one into a pouch. I'm at 37. This is what recovery looks like. Not fireworks, not feasts, just people, slowly, stubbornly, returning to the business of living. You arrive at a grain market, a real one this time, not some hollowed-out ghost parody. There are sacks, scales, sellers, buyers, noise. You lean into it, half expecting it all to vanish like a fever dream. But it doesn't. You touch a handful of wheat, coarse, golden, real. A young girl sees you hesitate. First time seeing food again, she jokes. You nod. She offers a smile that says, me too. Recovery in the crown of Aragon was uneven, drawn out, patchy. The famines didn't end with a bang, but with a long sigh. Harvests improved slightly, imports returned. Some fields were replanted, others abandoned. Some villages rebuilt, others forgotten entirely. Historians still argue whether this was a moment of renewal or simply a pause between catastrophes. But here, in this square, with the smell of grain and the creak of cartwheels and a dog barking at a chicken, you feel something more than survival. You feel a pulse. You wander to a monastery that's begun planting again. One monk waves you over. He shows you rows of beans just peeking out of the soil. We call them Saint Isidore's patience, he says. They take forever, but they always come. He points to a small shrine nearby with tiny offerings, buttons, coins, a doll's arm. The famine took more than lives, he explains. It took futures. This is how we start new ones. In Tortosa, you see a new well being dug, not because the old one failed, but because people believe in backup plans now. They test the water 5 times. No one laughs. Everyone nods. You meet a former bureaucrat now working as a miller. He used to calculate grain taxes. Now he just grinds. Numbers didn't feed anyone, he says. Flour does. He hands you a loaf, dense, warm, astonishing. You take a bite and nearly cry. Down the road, a teacher holds lessons under an old fig tree. Her chalkboard is a slate balanced on 2 rocks. She teaches children how to read grain prices. Because no one should starve out of ignorance again, she says. You spot an old woman sketching with a stick in the dirt, plans for a communal garden. No one owns it, she says, which means no one forgets it. Even songs return, subtly changed. You hear one tune again, the refrain you remember. If grain you lack, then wine you pour, and toast the rats behind your door. Only now the last line has shifted, and bless the bread that came once more. People still remember, but remembering isn't mourning anymore. It's mapping, a way forward drawn through the past. In Barcelona, a public scribe collects famine testimonies for a new town archive. He asks your name. You hesitate. You've gone by so many. Instead, you offer him a story, one you heard from a mute shepherd about God feeding those who feed each other. He writes it down, adds a little smile, and says, "We'll file it under wisdom from the hills." Yvonne. One last stop, a silent chapel on a hill above Leda. The door is open. Inside, the walls are bare, but someone has etched a single phrase in fresh paint. We were hungry, we were cruel, we were kind, we returned. You sit there for a while, and you think the crown of Aragon may have been cracked, but not shattered. Famine hollowed its stomach, but not its spine. It limped, but it moved. It wept, but it planted. It forgot how to laugh, but it remembered how to learn. And you, your shoes torn, your thoughts full, your belly just barely full, realize you've been changed too. Not just by what you saw, but by who you became while surviving it. The final turn in the road is quiet. A bird calls. Someone sings, faintly, and grain sways in a field nearby, golden, shimmering, indifferent, and eternal. And now, as you settle into the quiet hum of your room, your body still and your breath slower than before, let the last sounds of the crown of Aragon drift away like embers on a soft night wind. The hunger, the cold, the long march through dust and rumor, it's behind you now. You've made it through, not as a knight or a saint or a scholar, but as someone who simply kept going. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. Let your thoughts now become as gentle and slow as those re-emerging harvests. One seed at a time, one sigh of wind through dry grass, one bowl of something warm passed from hand to hand in silence. The world of the story lingers, just a little. A dog asleep by a hearth, a spoon carved with care, a lullaby hummed against a hollow belly. These are the small things that hold us together when everything else threatens to fall apart. So, wherever you are, city or countryside, hill or high-rise, know that the stories of survival are not just in books. They live in people, in you, in the quiet resilience of your every breath. Let your mind empty now, like a field finally allowed to rest. No more famine, no more noise. Just sleep. Good night.